Behind the simple facade of a church half hidden by a curtain of buildings, indifferent to the incessant coming and going of the crowds that move along the central Via Torino, is one of the gems of the Lombard Renaissance. It is the trompe-l'œil painting of the church choir, executed by Donato Bramante at the end of the 15th century. The young architect had been put in charge of the construction of a new church that would house a painting of the Virgin with a child, a painting considered miraculous because it had shown signs of bleeding after it had been hit with a knife. This sacred image, framed by a masonry arch, was painted on a wall near to the ancient sacellum of San Satiro. In 1478, the Confraternity of the Virgin of San Satiro, established in order to manage the worship of the sacred image, initiated the works for the construction of the new church. In 1483, the main parts of the building had been already completed. The area made available to Bramante for the construction was limited by some houses and by a road called Contrada del Falcone, that is, Falcon Street. Bramante built a church with a T-shaped ground plan, a large central nave, and two lateral aisles that extended to the transept, but only on the north side of it. Bramante did not have the room to build a choir on the south side of the transept. Therefore, by creating the optical illusion of depth with the artifice of perspective, he painted a trompe-l'œil of a choir by means of a stucco bas-relief showing three arches and a vaulted coffered ceiling. This created the illusion of a nave also on the south side of the transept. The optimal point of view for observing the perspective is at the center of the nave, at the level of the fourth pillar. The central nave and the transept are covered with barrel vaults separated by four lacunars, and the arches are round-shaped. The side aisles are covered with cross vaults. Above the cruciform pillars, adorned with Corinthian capitals, runs a beautiful decorated cornice. At the crossing between the central nave and the transept rises the cupola, decorated with gold and blue lacunars and illuminated by a small lantern at the top. The cupola is connected to the pillars by four pendentives. In each of them, a tondo is inserted. They show the four evangelists, painted by Bramantino. The decorative band at the base of the cupola is marked by tondi in terracotta, with busts of the prophets, a work by Agostino de Fondulis. In 1486, Giovan Antonio Amodeo was called to work at the church. He was commissioned with the facade towards the Contrada della Lupa, now Via Torino, following the instructions of Donato Bramante. However, his work was interrupted after only the base of the facade had been sculpted. Today, what remains of Amodeo's work can be seen in the rooms of the Sforza castle. Within the church, the overall pictorial project was entrusted to Ambrogio Bergognone, who, perhaps as early as 1494, intervened directly on several paintings, especially on the decorative parts and on the figures of saints for the niches in the transept. In 1514, Giovanni da Oggiano opened 2 doors in the transept, granting access from Via Falcone. On the right side of the church is the octagonal sacristy built on 2 levels. On the ground floor, flat and concave niches are alternated. On the upper level there is a loggia with double-arch windows illuminated by small circular openings. The sacristy receives light also from 8 large windows in the cupola and from the skylight. Between the 2 levels runs a terracotta frieze with large heads and cupids, a work of Agostino de Fondulis. The original doorway opened onto the right aisle of the church. The present entrance was created by architect Vandoni, together with the baptismal font. After the creation, in 1871, of the new small square facing Via Torino, Vandoni also realized the church facade, which had been left unfinished until then. The circular windows at the end of the transepts were opened in 1833. The history of the Church of Santa Maria is closely linked to that of the sacellum of San Satiro, which is at the end of the left transept of the church. The sacellum was built at the end of the 9th century by the Archbishop of Milan, Ansperto da Biassono, as a private chapel, together with a cell for the monks of the monastery of Sant'Ambrogio, and with an hospice for the sick and poor people and for the pilgrims. The ground plan of the sacellum has the form of a Greek cross inserted into a square. It shows 3 apses flanked by niches. The roof consists of barrel vaults and semi-caps supported by 16 columns of different materials with richly decorated capitals. Remains of frescoes recovered after recent restoration suggest that the interior of the building was once covered with paintings. Its architecture reminds us of the Byzantine architecture, but also of the Chapel of Sant'Aquilino in the Basilica of San Lorenzo in Milan. In 1400, the sacellum was restored, probably in accordance with the project of Leonardo da Vinci. This seems to be attested by several drawings of the project, which included the consolidation of the perimetral walls. Originally, a cupola was foreseen, but eventually the lantern designed by Donato Bramante was built instead, since in the meanwhile Bramante had taken over the responsibility for the construction site. In 1518, the work was completed, and a group of terracotta statues by Agostino de Fondulis, depicting the mourning for the Christ, was placed inside. The church tower is on 4 levels, separated by indented ledges and hanging arches. It has openings that become larger on the upper floors, up to the elegant double-arch window of the belfry. Built in the 11th century, this is Milan's oldest church tower, after that of Sant'Ambrogio. Today, the church tower that once used to be a landmark for the pilgrims looking for hospitality remains, like the rest of the church complex, half hidden among modern buildings, almost a foreign body within the hectic traffic of Milan's city center.